Welcome, friends. Today, we're diving into a story that's both heartwarming and inspiring. It's a tale about love, resilience, and the bonds that carry us through life's toughest moments. In a quiet corner of Austin, Texas, 72-year-old Roberto Morales sat in his room, staring out the window. His health had been fading, his memories slipping away like sand through his fingers. He had always prided himself on being independent, but now, living with his son Alejandro and his daughter-in-law Mariana, he felt like a shadow of the man he once was. It was a hard reality for Roberto, one he struggled to accept. He felt like he was becoming a burden. He watched as his family, busy with their own lives, seemed to forget about him. He often found himself alone, with only their neighbor Teresa for company. Though she was kind, her words were sometimes harsh. "They don't want you here, Roberto," she'd say. "Once we get old, our kids don't want to deal with us anymore." One lonely afternoon, Roberto, overcome with guilt, turned to Alejandro. "Take me to a nursing home," he said. "I don't want to be a burden to you or Mariana anymore." Alejandro sighed and promised they'd talk about it later, but Roberto couldn't shake the feeling that he was just becoming invisible to his own family. So, he made up his mind. If Alejandro wouldn't take him to a nursing home, he'd find one himself. That night, he sat alone in his room, holding onto a photograph of his late wife, Sophia, and whispering apologies into the stillness. Days passed, but nothing changed. Then, one bright Saturday morning, Alejandro walked into Roberto's room, holding a clean shirt and toiletries. "Pack your things, Papa," Alejandro said, his voice steady. "We're going on a trip." Roberto froze. His heart sank as he thought, "Finally, they're taking me to the nursing home." He packed quickly, folding his few belongings with precision, even placing Sophia's photograph on top. The car ride was quiet, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Alejandro drove, his eyes focused on the road, while Mariana sat beside him with a soft, mysterious smile. As they left the city behind and drove through the countryside, Roberto's mind wandered to happier days. He thought of his younger self, working with his loyal horse, Palomo, in the garden of his old home in San Antonio, and of his late wife, Sophia, whose laughter once filled the house. Soon, the city's skyscrapers gave way to fields and trees, but Roberto didn't recognize the area. A feeling of unease crept over him as they drove deeper into the unknown. "Where are we going?" he asked, his voice shaky. "You'll see," Alejandro replied with a smile. The car slowed, crunching over gravel as it came to a stop in a clearing. Roberto's heart pounded. Alejandro stepped out and opened the door, helping Roberto out of the car. But when Roberto looked around, his breath caught in his throat. Before him stood a house. His house. But it wasn't the burnt remains he had last seen. It was a house, fully restored, standing tall and beautiful, just as he remembered it. The white paint shimmered in the sunlight, and the porch railings were fresh and new. Roberto's knees buckled, and Alejandro quickly caught him. "Careful, Papa." Roberto could hardly believe his eyes. What is this?" he stammered. Alejandro smiled softly, his eyes full of emotion. "Welcome home, Papa." The house, with its fresh paint and familiar details, felt like a dream. Roberto slowly walked up the porch steps, his hands trembling as he touched the railing. The door opened, and inside, everything was restored. New floors, new walls, but it felt just like home. On the mantel above the fireplace was a framed photo of Roberto and Sophia on their wedding day. As Roberto gazed at it, his heart swelled with emotion. "Papa, we never planned to send you away," Alejandro said, his voice thick with emotion. "When the house burned down, we promised ourselves we'd rebuild it. We couldn't tell you. We wanted it to be a surprise." Mariana, with a warm smile, added, "The neighbors helped too." Everyone pitched in. Alejandro reached into a drawer and handed Roberto a thick envelope. "Do you remember those papers you signed?" he asked. Roberto nodded, unsure where this was leading. Alejandro smiled gently. "Those weren't for selling the land. They were construction permits. We needed your approval to rebuild." Tears filled Roberto's eyes as he looked around. I thought I lost everything, he whispered, his voice breaking. Sofia, this house. Not everything, Papa, Alejandro said, handing him a photo album. The pages were slightly singed from the fire, but the photos inside were full of life. Pictures of Roberto and Sofia dancing, Alejandro's first steps, and memories of their old garden. Then Roberto heard a sound that stopped his heart. Outside, Palomo, his beloved horse, stood tied near the garden, his coat gleaming in the sunlight. Roberto's eyes widened as the horse whinnied, calling to him. Palomo, Roberto whispered, rushing outside to embrace the horse. He had thought he'd lost him too, but there he was, alive and well, thanks to the efforts of the neighbors who had cared for him after the fire. As Roberto stood there, his hand on Palomo's mane, the realization of what Alejandro and Mariana had done for him finally sank in. They had rebuilt not just a house, but his life. The love, effort, and dedication they had poured into this home were overwhelming. Later that evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Roberto sat with Alejandro and Mariana on the porch. Palomo grazed nearby, and the air was filled with the peaceful sounds of nature. For the first time in years, Roberto felt at peace, surrounded by love. I was wrong, Roberto said softly. I thought I was a burden, but you've shown me that I'm anything but. Alejandro squeezed his hand. You're our foundation, Papa. As Roberto unpacked his belongings, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in so long. This was home, not just because of the house, but because of the love that filled it. He had thought he'd lost everything, but in reality, he had gained something even greater, his family's love, his purpose, and a place to call home again. And so, as Roberto sat in his old armchair, the same one he had shared so many memories in with Sofia, he realized that sometimes the most precious things in life aren't the things we think we've lost. They're the things we've always had, hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be rediscovered. Comment below. What do you think of Alejandro's decision to rebuild his father's home? Would you have made the same choice or handled it differently? Let us know your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories like this one.